If you think you know what hell looks like, think again. Hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and drop a comment if you dare, because what you're about to witness will haunt you long after this video ends. October 2nd, 1992. São Paulo, Brazil. The emergency radio crackles to life at 4:23 p.m. Shots fired. Mass casualties. Carandiru Prison. Officer down. Send everyone. Detective Paulo Mendes grips the steering wheel tighter as his patrol car screams through the congested streets of São Paulo. Smoke rises in thick, black columns from the Carandiru Penitentiary complex, visible from miles away. The prison, built to hold 3,500 inmates, currently houses over 8,000 men in conditions that would make a medieval dungeon look merciful. Today, something has gone catastrophically wrong. When Paulo's car screeches to a halt outside the prison walls, the scene is chaos. Military police vehicles form a perimeter, their officers pale-faced and shaking. Ambulances idle with nowhere to go. No wounded are being brought out, only bodies. Paulo counts 6 gurneys lined up, then stops counting. A young officer vomits against a wall. Another sits on the curb, staring at his blood-stained hands. What happened here? Paulo demands, flashing his badge to the commanding officer at the gate. Captain Rodriguez, a 20-year veteran with dead eyes, lights a cigarette with trembling fingers. A riot in Pavilion 9 started over a football game between inmates. 2 rival gangs. Escalated fast. By the time we got the call, they had hostages, makeshift weapons, and complete control of the cell block. Paulo follows Rodriguez through the prison entrance. The smell hits him first. Blood, gunpowder, and something else. Fear. Raw, animalistic fear that seems to seep from the concrete walls themselves. They pass through 3 security checkpoints, each one manned by military police with assault rifles and expressions that tell Paulo they've seen something that changed them forever. Pavilion 9 stands at the heart of the complex. A 5-story concrete structure, originally designed as a modern holding facility in 1920, now transformed into a vertical nightmare of overcrowding and desperation. 3 inmates per cell built for 1. No running water on most floors. Makeshift weapons everywhere. And today, it became a slaughterhouse. As they approach the pavilion entrance, Paulo notices something strange. Bullet holes.
Hundreds of them.
Concentrated at chest height, riddling the walls in systematic patterns. Not the wild spray of panicked shooting. This was deliberate. Methodical. Execution-style patterns. Inside, the scene defies comprehension. Bodies lie stacked in corridors. Some curled in fetal positions. Others pressed against walls as if trying to phase through concrete to escape. The walls are painted in arterial spray patterns. Spent shell casings crunch underfoot like grotesque gravel. Paulo has investigated murders for 15 years. He's never seen anything like this. How many? Paulo asks, his voice barely a whisper. We've counted 87 so far, Rodriguez replies, his cigarette burning forgotten between his fingers. But we haven't cleared the upper floors yet. The colonel says we neutralized the riot. Saved lives. Prevented a breakout. Paulo kneels beside a body. A young man, maybe 22, with gang tattoos covering his arms. 3 bullet wounds. Chest, stomach, head. He examines another. Same pattern.
And another.
Clinical. Professional. These weren't shots fired in the chaos of a riot. These were executions. Where are the survivors? Paulo asks, standing slowly. Rodriguez doesn't meet his eyes. Pavilion 9 was completely secured. No survivors from the riot zone. No survivors? Paulo's voice rises. There were over 2,000 inmates in this pavilion. You're telling me every single one involved in the riot is dead? Before Rodriguez can answer, a shout echoes from the upper levels. 2 military police officers descend the stairs, dragging a man between them. He's covered in blood, but Paulo can see he's uninjured. The blood belongs to others. Found this one hiding in a cell on the 4th floor, one officer reports. Playing dead under 3 bodies. The inmate, A man named Carlos, with tears streaming down his face, looks at Paulo with eyes that have seen the end of the world. "They killed everyone," he whispers. "We weren't rioting anymore. We'd surrendered. Put down the weapons. They came in anyway. Shot everyone they saw. Cell by cell. Floor by floor. I heard them laughing." Rodriguez moves to silence Carlos, but Paulo steps between them. "Let him talk." "They went cell to cell," Carlos continues, his voice breaking. "If you ran, they shot you. If you surrendered, they shot you. If you hid, they found you and shot you. The colonel gave the order. Clean sweep. No witnesses. I only survived because I fell into a pile of bodies and they didn't check if everyone was dead." Paulo turns to Rodriguez, his hand instinctively moving to his service weapon. "How many military police were involved in this operation?" 300 officers, Rodriguez answers quietly. "Full tactical deployment." Paulo's mind races. 300 armed officers. Systematic execution patterns. No survivors from a riot involving potentially hundreds of inmates. This wasn't crowd control. This was a massacre. And someone at the highest levels authorized it. He walks deeper into Pavilion 9, documenting everything with his camera. Each cell tells the same story. Bodies pressed into corners. Defensive wounds on arms and hands. No weapons in sight. These men died trying to protect themselves, not attack others. In cell 347, Paulo finds something that makes his blood run cold. A makeshift calendar scratched into the wall. Days counted in groups of 5. Next to it, a message carved with a bent nail. "If you're reading this, tell my mother I tried to survive. Tell her what they did to us." Paulo photographs the message, his hands steady despite the rage building in his chest. He's no longer investigating a riot. He's documenting a war crime. And the evidence is overwhelming. As the sun sets over São Paulo, the official count rises. 111 dead inmates. Not a single officer killed. Not a single officer seriously injured. The mathematics of the situation are impossible to ignore. This was never about stopping a riot. But when Paulo returns to the entrance to file his initial report, he finds Captain Rodriguez waiting with 2 men in expensive suits. Federal officials. They confiscate his camera, take his notes, and deliver a message that changes everything. "Detective Mendez, this investigation is now classified as a matter of national security. All evidence will be processed through military channels. Your services are no longer required. In fact, for your own safety, we recommend you forget everything you saw here today." Paulo stares at them, understanding dawning like ice water in his veins. This wasn't just a massacre. This was an officially sanctioned massacre. And someone very powerful wants it buried. He walks to his car, his mind racing with the weight of what he's witnessed. 111 dead men. No justice. No accountability. Just silence and threats. But as he starts his engine, his radio crackles one more time. A voice he doesn't recognize.
Distorted.
Encrypted. "Detective Mendez, if you want to know why Carandiru really happened, meet me at the Café Mondrian at midnight. Come alone. And detective, trust no one in uniform. The corruption goes higher than you can possibly imagine." Paulo sits in his car as darkness falls over the city, staring at the prison walls where over 100 men died today. The official story is already being written. Heroic officers stopping a dangerous riot. Necessary force to prevent a mass escape. But Paulo knows the truth. And somewhere out there, someone else knows it too. Someone willing to risk everything to expose it. He checks his watch. 6 hours until midnight. 6 hours to decide if he's willing to die for the truth. Because after what he witnessed today, Paulo knows one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever happened at Carandiru was just the beginning. The real conspiracy, the real horror, is still buried. And it's buried deep enough to kill anyone who tries to dig it up. Café Mondrian sits in the shadows of São Paulo's financial district, a relic from the 1950s wedged between gleaming skyscrapers. At 11:47 p.m., Detective Paulo Mendez enters through the back entrance, his service weapon concealed but ready. The cafe is nearly empty. A bartender wipes glasses without looking up. Two elderly men play chess in the corner, oblivious to the world around them. Paolo takes a booth in the back, positioning himself with a clear view of both exits. His mind hasn't stopped racing since he left Carandiru. 111 dead inmates. No investigation. His evidence confiscated. The federal agent's threats still echo in his ears. He's crossing a line tonight, and there's no going back. At precisely midnight, a woman slides into the booth across from him. She's in her early 40s, dressed in a dark business suit, with sharp eyes that have seen too much. She places a worn leather briefcase on the table between them, but doesn't open it. "I'm Dr. Sylvia Campos," she says quietly, her voice controlled but trembling slightly. "I was the chief medical examiner assigned to process the bodies from Carandiru. I was, until 3 hours ago when I was suspended without explanation and told to surrender all my findings." Paolo leans forward. "What did you find?" Sylvia glances around the cafe before answering. "Every body I examined told the same story. Close-range executions. Many shot multiple times after they were already down. I found inmates with their hands raised, bullets through their palms before the kill shots to their heads. Defensive wounds everywhere. Paolo, these men weren't fighting when they died. They were begging for their lives." She opens the briefcase slightly, revealing manila folders stuffed with photographs and documents. "I made copies before they came for my files. Autopsy reports. Ballistic analysis. Witness statements from the few survivors. But there's something else, something that connects this massacre to something much bigger." Paolo's pulse quickens. "What are you talking about?" Sylvia pulls out a photograph. It shows a tattoo on a dead inmate's shoulder. A symbol Paolo doesn't recognize, a crown over 3 daggers. This tattoo appears on 17 of the deceased. It's the mark of the Primeiro Commando, a prison gang that's been consolidating power across Brazil's penal system for the past decade. But here's what's interesting. Every single inmate with this tattoo was executed with a single shot to the back of the head. Professional. Efficient. The others were shot multiple times chaotically. 2 different killing styles, Paolo. 2 different objectives. "You're saying the military police weren't just stopping a riot," Paolo processes aloud. "They were conducting targeted assassinations under the cover of riot control." "Exactly," Sylvia confirms, her voice dropping even lower. "Someone used the chaos of the riot as an opportunity to eliminate key members of the Primeiro Commando. The other deaths were collateral damage to disguise the real mission. But it gets worse." She pulls out another document, a financial ledger with handwritten notes. "One of the survivors I interviewed before they silenced me was a man named Eduardo Silva. He was a bookkeeper for the Primeiro Commando inside Carandiru. He kept detailed records of their operations. Drug trafficking, extortion, bribes paid to guards and officials. Eduardo told me that 3 days before the massacre, the gang's leadership received a warning from someone inside the military police. They were told to evacuate Pavilion 9. Most of the leadership ignored it, thinking it was a trick. But 5 of them transferred to different pavilions the day before the riot." Paolo's mind races with the implications. So someone inside the military police tipped off the gang leadership about the planned assault. But most of them didn't believe it. "Or couldn't get transferred in time," Sylvia adds. Eduardo said the gang had been keeping detailed records of every corrupt official they'd been paying off for years. Names, amounts, dates, everything. They called it their insurance policy. If the authorities ever moved against them, they'd release the documents and bring down half the prison administration, several judges, and at least a dozen politicians. "Where are these records now?" Paolo asks, though he already knows the answer. "That's the question everyone's asking," Sylvia replies. Eduardo claims the gang's second-in-command, a man named Roberto, the ghost Mendoza, kept the master ledger. Roberto was supposed to be in Pavilion 9 during the massacre. His body was never officially identified. I examined all 111 corpses. None matched Roberto's description from his prison file. Paolo sits back, the pieces falling into place. So either Roberto escaped during the massacre, or he was never there to begin with. And whoever ordered the hit wants that ledger. Sylvia nods grimly. But there's more. I pulled the personnel files for the military police unit that conducted the operation. 300 officers participated. But the unit's commanding officer, Colonel Augusto Ferreira, wasn't on the official roster until 2 weeks before the massacre. He was transferred specifically to oversee security at Carandiru. And his previous assignment? He was head of security for the state governor's office. The implications hit Paulo like a freight train. This wasn't just prison corruption. This went to the highest levels of state government. The governor. Paulo breathes. Someone in the governor's office ordered this. I can't prove it, Sylvia says, but follow the logic. The Primero Commando has documentation of bribes paid to officials. That documentation threatens powerful people. A riot breaks out, conveniently providing cover for a military operation. The gang's leadership is systematically eliminated, and the one man who might have escaped with the evidence is now a ghost. Paulo, someone orchestrated this entire event. Before Paulo can respond, his phone vibrates. A text from an unknown number. Leave the cafe now. You're being watched. Both of you. Paulo shows Sylvia the message. Her face goes pale. We need to move, he says, standing and scanning the cafe. The two elderly men are still playing chess, but something's wrong. They haven't moved a piece in 5 minutes. The bartender has disappeared. Back exit, Paulo says, guiding Sylvia toward the rear of the cafe. They're halfway to the door when it bursts open. 2 men in dark suits enter, their hands reaching inside their jackets. Federal agents. The same ones who confiscated Paulo's evidence at Carandiru. Paulo doesn't hesitate. He draws his weapon, firing twice over their heads to force them back, then grabs Sylvia and runs toward the kitchen. They crash through the swinging doors into a cramped space filled with industrial ovens and prep stations. A rear door leads to an alley. They burst into the narrow alley, running toward the street. Behind them, footsteps pound. Shouts echo off the walls. Paulo's car is parked 2 blocks away. They'll never make it. A van screeches around the corner ahead of them, blocking their path. Paulo raises his weapon, but the side door slides open, revealing a face he recognizes from the Carandiru files. Eduardo Silva, the gang's bookkeeper, sits in the passenger seat. Get in if you want to live, Eduardo shouts. Paulo hesitates for only a second. The federal agents are closing in behind them. He and Sylvia dive into the van. It accelerates before the door even closes, tires squealing as it races through São Paulo's midnight streets. How did you find us? Paulo demands, his weapon still drawn, but not pointed at Eduardo. I've been following you since you left Carandiru, Eduardo replies calmly. You're the only cop who seems to actually care about finding the truth. That makes you valuable. Or possibly suicidal. I haven't decided which yet. The van weaves through traffic. The driver, a young man with a Primero Commando tattoo, expertly navigating side streets and alleys. Behind them, no sign of pursuit.
For now.
Where's Roberto Mendoza? Sylvia asks directly. Eduardo smiles without humor. The ghost is alive. And he has the ledger. But he's not in São Paulo anymore. After Carandiru, he knew they'd come for him.
So he went underground. Deep underground.
And he took the evidence with him. Why are you helping us? Paulo asks. Because 111 men died in that prison, Eduardo says, his voice hardening. Some of them were my friends. Some were monsters. But none of them deserved what happened. The military police came in like it was a war. They shot unarmed men. They laughed while they did it. And now the government is covering it up, calling it justified force. Someone needs to expose the truth. The van pulls into an underground parking garage beneath an abandoned warehouse. They descend 3 levels into darkness until they reach a makeshift safe house set up in a storage room. Maps cover the walls. Photographs. Documents. It's an investigation room, mirroring what Paulo would have set up if he hadn't been shut down. Roberto left me instructions, Eduardo explains, spreading a map of Brazil across a table. If anything happened at Carandiru, if the authorities moved against the gang, I was to find someone outside the system who might actually care. A honest cop. I've been watching you for 12 hours, detective. You're either the bravest man I've met or the stupidest. Where is Roberto now? Paolo presses. Eduardo points to a location on the map. A small town called Aparecida, 3 hours north of São Paulo. He's hiding in a church there. Santo Antonio Cathedral. He has the ledger and 3 witnesses who survived the massacre. Men who saw everything. Men who can testify about who gave the orders. Why doesn't he just go public? Sylvia asks. Because the moment that ledger surfaces, he's a dead man, Eduardo says flatly. The names in there, the evidence of corruption, it implicates dozens of powerful people. Judges, politicians, police commanders, even military generals. Roberto knows that if he goes to the wrong person, they'll kill him and bury the evidence. He needs someone he can trust. Someone who can't be bought or intimidated. Paolo stares at the map, feeling the weight of the decision crushing down on him. If he goes to Aparecida, he's committing career suicide. He'll be labeled a traitor to the force, hunted by the same people he once worked alongside. But if he walks away, the truth about Carandiru dies with him. I need to make a call, Paolo says. No phones, Eduardo warns. They'll trace it. Not this one, Paolo replies, pulling out a burner phone he bought earlier. He dials a number from memory. It rings 4 times before a familiar voice answers. Paolo, do you know what time it is? Maria, I need you to listen very carefully, Paolo says to his former partner, now working in the federal prosecutor's office. Carandiru wasn't a riot suppression. It was a government-sanctioned massacre. I have evidence. I have witnesses. But I need protection, and I need it from someone I can trust absolutely. Silence on the line. Then, Paolo, people are looking for you. Federal agents came to my office 3 hours ago, asking questions. They said you've gone rogue, that you stole evidence from a crime scene. They're calling you dangerous.
Do you believe that?
Paolo asks. Another pause.
No.
I've known you 15 years. You're a lot of things, but dangerous to innocent people isn't one of them. What do you need? A federal prosecutor willing to take on the government. Someone with the guts to go after the people who ordered this.
Can you do that?
If the evidence is as solid as you say, yes. But Paolo, this will destroy careers. Including mine if I'm wrong. Including yours even if I'm right. Are you sure? Paolo looks at Sylvia, then at Eduardo, then at the photographs covering the walls. 111 dead men staring back at him from crime scene photos. I'm sure, he says. Then meet me tomorrow at dawn. The Chapel of Nossa Senhora.
Come alone.
If this is as big as you say, we'll need to move fast before they shut us down. Paolo ends the call. Eduardo is watching him carefully. You trust this prosecutor? With my life, Paolo answers. You might have to, Eduardo replies. Then he pulls out a photograph, sliding it across the table. It shows a man in an expensive suit shaking hands with Colonel Ferreira outside the governor's mansion. Paolo recognizes the man immediately. That's Minister of Justice Rafael Santos, Paolo says slowly. Taken 3 days before the Carandiru Massacre, Eduardo confirms. Roberto found it in the colonel's office after the assault. Whatever happened at that prison, it was authorized from the very top. And Minister Santos has presidential ambitions. If this evidence goes public, it doesn't just destroy him. It brings down the entire administration. Paolo stares at the photograph, understanding finally crystallizing. This isn't just about corruption or a prison massacre. This is about power. About eliminating threats to political ambitions. About men willing to kill over 100 people to protect their secrets. And now, Paolo Mendes holds the power to expose them all. But as he prepares to leave for Aparecida, his phone vibrates one more time. Another unknown number. Another message. Detective Mendes, we have your daughter. If you want to see her alive again, you'll forget everything you learned tonight. Destroy the evidence. Walk away. You have 6 hours to decide. Choose wisely. Paolo's blood turns to ice. His daughter, Anna, is at university 3 hours away. He tries calling her number. No answer. Again. Straight to voicemail. Again, Sylvia sees his face. What's wrong? Paolo shows them the message, his hands trembling for the first time tonight. Eduardo's expression darkens. They're playing for keeps now. This is how they silence people.
Threats. Kidnapping.
Murder. Whatever it takes. I have to find her, Paolo says, already moving toward the exit. Paolo doesn't hesitate. He draws his weapon, firing twice over their heads to force them back, then grabs Sylvia and runs toward the kitchen. They crash through the swinging doors into a cramped space filled with industrial ovens and prep stations. A rear door leads to an alley. They burst into the narrow alley, running toward the street. Behind them, footsteps pound. Shouts echo off the walls. Paolo's car is parked 2 blocks away. They'll never make it. A van screeches around the corner ahead of them, blocking their path. Paolo raises his weapon, but the side door slides open, revealing a face he recognizes from the Carandiru files. Eduardo Silva, the gang's bookkeeper, sits in the passenger seat. Get in if you want to live, Eduardo shouts. Paolo hesitates for only a second. The federal agents are closing in behind them. He and Sylvia dive into the van. It accelerates before the door even closes, tires squealing as it races through São Paulo's midnight streets. How did you find us? Paolo demands, his weapon still drawn, but not pointed at Eduardo. I've been following you since you left Carandiru, Eduardo replies calmly. You're the only cop who seems to actually care about finding the truth. That makes you valuable. Or possibly suicidal. I haven't decided which yet. The van weaves through traffic. The driver, a young man with a Primero Commando tattoo, expertly navigating side streets and alleys. Behind them, no sign of pursuit.
For now.
Where's Roberto Mendoza? Sylvia asks directly. Eduardo smiles without humor. The ghost is alive. And he has the ledger. But he's not in São Paulo anymore. After Carandiru, he knew they'd come for him.
So he went underground. Deep underground.
And he took the evidence with him. Why are you helping us? Paolo asks. Because 111 men died in that prison, Eduardo says, his voice hardening. Some of them were my friends. Some were monsters. But none of them deserved what happened. The military police came in like it was a war. They shot unarmed men. They laughed while they did it. And now the government is covering it up, calling it justified force. Someone needs to expose the truth. The van pulls into an underground parking garage beneath an abandoned warehouse. They descend 3 levels into darkness until they reach a makeshift safe house set up in a storage room. Maps cover the walls. Photographs. Documents. It's an investigation room, mirroring what Paolo would have set up if he hadn't been shut down. Roberto left me instructions, Eduardo explains, spreading a map of Brazil across a table. If anything happened at Carandiru, if the authorities moved against the gang, I was to find someone outside the system who might actually care. A honest cop. I've been watching you for 12 hours, detective. You're either the bravest man I've met or the stupidest. Where's Roberto now? Paolo presses. Eduardo points to a location on the map. A small town called Aparecida, 3 hours north of São Paulo. He's hiding in a church there. Santo Antonio Cathedral. He has the ledger and 3 witnesses who survived the massacre. Men who saw everything. Men who can testify about who gave the orders. Why doesn't he just go public? Sylvia asks. Because the moment that ledger surfaces, he's a dead man, Eduardo says flatly. The names in there, the evidence of corruption, it implicates dozens of powerful people. Judges, politicians, police commanders, even military generals. Roberto knows that if he goes to the wrong person, they'll kill him and bury the evidence. He needs someone he can trust. Someone who can't be bought or intimidated. Paolo stares at the map, feeling the weight of the decision crushing down on him. If he goes to Aparecida, he's committing career suicide. He'll be labeled a traitor to the force, hunted by the same people he once worked alongside. But if he walks away, the truth about Carandiru dies with him. I need to make a call, Paolo says. No phones, Eduardo warns. They'll trace it. Not this one, Paulo replies, pulling out a burner phone he bought earlier. He dials a number from memory. It rings 4 times before a familiar voice answers. Paulo? Do you know what time it is? Maria, I need you to listen very carefully, Paulo says to his former partner, now working in the federal prosecutor's office. Carandiru wasn't a riot suppression. It was a government-sanctioned massacre. I have evidence. I have witnesses. But I need protection, and I need it from someone I can trust absolutely. Silence on the line. Then, Paulo, people are looking for you. Federal agents came to my office 3 hours ago, asking questions. They said you've gone rogue, that you stole evidence from a crime scene. They're calling you dangerous.
Do you believe that?
Paulo asks. Another pause.
No.
I've known you 15 years. You're a lot of things, but dangerous to innocent people isn't one of them. What do you need? A federal prosecutor willing to take on the government. Someone with the guts to go after the people who ordered this.
Can you do that?
If the evidence is as solid as you say, yes. But Paulo, this will destroy careers. Including mine if I'm wrong. Including yours even if I'm right. Are you sure? Paulo looks at Sylvia, then at Eduardo, then at the photographs covering the walls. 111 dead men staring back at him from crime scene photos. I'm sure, he says. Then meet me tomorrow at dawn. The Chapel of Nossa Senhora.
Come alone.
If this is as big as you say, we'll need to move fast before they shut us down. Paulo ends the call. Eduardo is watching him carefully. You trust this prosecutor? With my life, Paulo answers. You might have to, Eduardo replies. Then he pulls out a photograph, sliding it across the table. It shows a man in an expensive suit shaking hands with Colonel Ferreira outside the governor's mansion. Paulo recognizes the man immediately. That's Minister of Justice Rafael Santos, Paulo says slowly. Taken 3 days before the Carandiru Massacre, Eduardo confirms. Roberto found it in the colonel's office after the assault. Whatever happened at that prison, it was authorized from the very top. And Minister Santos has presidential ambitions. If this evidence goes public, it doesn't just destroy him. It brings down the entire administration. Paulo stares at the photograph, understanding finally crystallizing. This isn't just about corruption or a prison massacre. This is about power. About eliminating threats to political ambitions. About men willing to kill over 100 people to protect their secrets. And now, Paulo Mendes holds the power to expose them all. But as he prepares to leave for Aparecida, his phone vibrates one more time. Another unknown number. Another message. Detective Mendes, we have your daughter. If you want to see her alive again, you'll forget everything you learned tonight. Destroy the evidence. Walk away. You have 6 hours to decide. Choose wisely. Paulo's blood turns to ice. His daughter, Ana, is at university 3 hours away. He tries calling her number. No answer. Again. Straight to voicemail. Again, Sylvia sees his face. What's wrong? Paulo shows them the message, his hands trembling for the first time tonight. Eduardo's expression darkens. They're playing for keeps now. This is how they silence people.
Threats. Kidnapping.
Murder. Whatever it takes. I have to find her, Paulo says, already moving toward the exit. Wait. Eduardo stops him. If you go rushing in blind, you'll get her killed and yourself killed. These people are professionals. They've planned this. But we can beat them. Roberto has connections. People who owe him favors. If your daughter's been taken, we can find her. But you need to trust me. Paulo wants to scream, to run, to tear the city apart with his bare hands. But his training kicks in. Eduardo's right. Panic gets people killed. How long will it take? Paulo asks through gritted teeth. Give me 2 hours, Eduardo says, already pulling out his own phone. I'll find her. I promise. As Eduardo makes calls in rapid Portuguese, speaking in code to contacts across the city, Paulo sits down heavily, his head in his hands. He thinks about Ana. Her smile. Her dreams of becoming a lawyer like he'd always wanted to be. The way she believed her father was a hero fighting for justice. And now she's paying the price for his integrity. Sylvia sits beside him, saying nothing. Sometimes silence is the only comfort that makes sense. Finally, Eduardo hangs up. I found her. She's alive. They're holding her in a warehouse near the port.
3 guards.
Professional security, but not military. They're using her as leverage to make you back off. But here's what they don't know. Roberto has men positioned all over this city. Men loyal to him. Men who survived Carandiru and want justice just as badly as you do. What are you proposing? Paulo asks. Eduardo's smile is cold and dangerous. We take her back. And then we burn their entire operation to the ground. But detective, once we do this, there's no middle ground anymore. You're either all in, or you walk away now and try to negotiate for your daughter's life. But know this. If you negotiate, they'll never let either of you go. They'll always have leverage. The only way you both survive this is if we expose everything. Make you too public to kill quietly. Paulo looks at the map, at the photographs, at the evidence of systematic corruption and murder. He thinks about the 111 dead inmates, about the lies being told, about the powerful men sleeping peacefully in their mansions while families grieve. He thinks about Anna, terrified in a warehouse, wondering if her father will save her. And he makes his choice. Let's go get my daughter, Paulo says, standing. And then let's destroy everyone responsible for Carandiru. Every single one of them. Eduardo nods approvingly. Now you're thinking like someone who wants to survive this. Roberto always said the most dangerous person in any fight is the one with nothing left to lose. Looks like we're about to find out if he's right. As they prepare to leave, Sylvia grabs Paulo's arm. For what it's worth, you're doing the right thing. Those 111 men deserve justice. Your daughter deserves to live in a world where the powerful can't kill with impunity. This is bigger than all of us now. Paulo nods, checking his weapon one more time. In 6 hours, everything changes. Either he exposes the truth about Carandiru and saves his daughter, or he dies trying. But one way or another, the silence ends tonight. The warehouse sits at the edge of São Paulo's industrial port, a decaying monument to Brazil's economic collapse of the 1980s. At 3:47 a.m., Detective Paulo Mendes crouches in the shadows 200 meters away, watching through binoculars as 3 guards patrol the perimeter. His service weapon feels heavier than usual against his ribs. Everything depends on the next 60 minutes. Eduardo Silva appears beside him, silent as smoke. Behind them, 5 men from the Primeiro Commando wait in a stolen delivery truck, their faces hardened by years of surviving Brazil's brutal prison system. Strange allies for a detective, but tonight, the lines between law and outlaw have blurred beyond recognition. 2 guards outside, one inside with your daughter, Eduardo whispers. They're rotating every 30 minutes. Next rotation is in 4 minutes. That's our window. Paulo's phone vibrates. A message from the unknown number. Your time is running out, detective. 4 hours left. Make the right choice. He silences the phone and focuses on the warehouse. Through a grimy window, he can see movement. A figure tied to a chair.
Anna.
She's alive. That's all that matters right now. When we move fast, Eduardo continues. My men will handle the outside guards. You and I go in for your daughter. No guns unless absolutely necessary. We need at least one of them alive to talk. These aren't federal agents, Paulo. They're private contractors. Mercenaries. Someone hired them off the books, which means they know who gave the orders. The next 4 minutes feel like 4 hours. Paulo's mind races through every possible scenario, every way this could go wrong. But he's done questioning his choices. The moment they took Anna, they sealed their fate. Eduardo signals. The Primeiro Commando men move like ghosts, splitting into 2 teams. Paulo follows Eduardo toward the warehouse's side entrance, a rusted door hanging on broken hinges. They slip inside into darkness thick with the smell of oil and decay. Inside, the warehouse is a maze of old shipping containers and abandoned machinery. Somewhere in this labyrinth, they're holding Anna. Paulo's training takes over, every sense heightened, his weapon drawn but pointed down. Eduardo moves ahead, navigating the space with the confidence of someone who's lived in shadows his entire life. They find her in the center of the warehouse, in a cleared space lit by a single hanging bulb. Anna is bound to a metal chair, her face bruised but defiant. One guard stands 10 feet away, scrolling through his phone, bored. He doesn't see them approach. Eduardo moves first, fast and silent. His arm wraps around the guard's throat from behind, cutting off any sound. The guard struggles, drops his phone, his hand reaching for a weapon that Paolo is already removing. In 15 seconds, it's over. The guard slumps unconscious, zip-tied and gagged. Paolo rushes to Anna, cutting her restraints with a knife. "Are you hurt, Dad?" Her voice cracks with relief and disbelief. "How did you find me?" Later, he says, helping her stand. "Can you walk?" She nods, and Paolo feels a weight lift from his chest. But Eduardo's expression stops his relief cold. "We have a problem," Eduardo says, looking at his phone. "My men outside. They're not responding." The lights in the warehouse suddenly blaze to full brightness. Paolo spins, weapon raised, pulling Anna behind him. From behind the shipping containers, figures emerge. Not 3 guards. 15. All armed. All aiming their weapons at Paolo, Eduardo, and Anna. And leading them, stepping into the light with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes, is Colonel Augusto Ferreira himself. "Detective Mendez," the colonel says, his voice carrying across the warehouse. "You're a difficult man to predict. We expected you to come alone, perhaps with your prosecutor friend. We didn't anticipate you'd align yourself with prison gang members. How far you've fallen." Paolo keeps his weapon raised, but the mathematics are impossible. 15 against 2. Anna between them, and certain death. "Where are Eduardo's men?" Paolo demands. "The 5 gang members who accompanied you? Currently zip-tied in the back of your truck. We've been watching you since you left the safe house, Detective. Did you really think we wouldn't monitor every criminal safe house in the city? We let you come here. We wanted you all in one place." Eduardo curses under his breath. This was a setup from the beginning. "Not entirely," Colonel Ferreira says, walking closer but staying safely behind his men. "We did take your daughter to motivate you, Detective. That was real. But we've been several steps ahead of you all night. The question now is whether you're smart enough to see the way out we're offering. I'm not making any deals with the man who massacred 111 inmates," Paolo says, his finger on the trigger. The colonel's expression hardens. "Massacred? Is that what you think happened? Detective, you have no idea what you stumbled into. Carandiru wasn't about stopping a riot. You were right about that much. But it wasn't about eliminating gang leadership either. That was a convenient side effect. Then what was it about?" Sylvia's voice calls out. She emerges from behind a container, her hands raised. 2 guards flank her. They caught her trying to circle behind the colonel's position. "Dr. Campos," the colonel acknowledges. "The crusading medical examiner. You 3 are quite the team. Pity it ends here." He pauses, seeming to consider something. "But perhaps you deserve to know the truth before you die. Or before you disappear into a prison cell yourself, which amounts to the same thing." He pulls out a tablet, tapping the screen. 3 months before the Carandiru Massacre, the Primero Commando kidnapped the daughter of Judge Enrique Costa. You remember Judge Costa, Detective? The hardliner who sentenced hundreds of gang members to maximum sentences? The gang wanted leverage. They wanted their leadership released. But Judge Costa refused to negotiate. The colonel shows them the screen. A photograph of a teenage girl, eyes wide with terror. Isabella Costa, 16 years old. The gang held her for 2 weeks. Did things to her I won't describe in front of your daughter, Detective. When Judge Costa still refused their demands, they killed Isabella. Sent pieces of her back to him. The judge shot himself 3 days later. Paolo's stomach turns, but he doesn't lower his weapon. That's tragic. But it doesn't justify. Justify? The colonel's voice rises for the first time. The Primero Commando wasn't just running drugs and extortion, Detective. They were running a kidnapping operation from inside Carandiru, using visitors' corrupt guards, outside contacts. They'd abducted 17 people in 6 months.
businessmen,
politicians' family members, anyone who could pay. And they were protected inside that prison. Untouchable. So yes, when orders came down to eliminate the threat, I followed them. And I'd do it again. Orders from who? Sylvia demands. Who authorized the massacre? The colonel smiles. That's the right question, Doctor. But I'm afraid I can't answer it. Some secrets are worth more than one man's life. Or 3 lives in your case. Eduardo speaks up, his voice steady despite the weapons aimed at him. You're wrong about one thing, Colonel. You didn't eliminate the threat. Roberto Mendoza escaped. And he has documentation of every crime the Primero Commando committed, including the kidnappings. But he also has documentation of every bribe paid, every official bought, every order given, including the order that sent you into Carandiru to execute those men. The colonel's smile fades. Roberto the ghost. Yes, we've been looking for him. You're going to tell me where he is. Even if we knew, we'd never tell you, Eduardo says. Oh, I think you will, the colonel replies. He gestures, and one of his men grabs Anna, pressing a gun to her head. You see, Detective, I don't need all 3 of you alive.
Just one.
Someone has to be the example, the corrupt cop who died resisting arrest after conspiring with prison gangs. But your daughter? She's innocent. She could walk out of here, go back to her life, her university, her dreams. All you have to do is tell me where Roberto is hiding. Paulo's world narrows to a single point, the gun against his daughter's head. Every instinct screams at him to comply, to save her, to sacrifice everything for her life. He sees the terror in Anna's eyes, sees her silently begging him to save her. But he also sees the photograph on the colonel's tablet. Isabella Costa, 16 years old, tortured and murdered. He thinks about the 111 dead inmates, some guilty of terrible crimes, some just caught in the wrong place, all executed without trial. And he understands that if he gives up Roberto now, the cycle continues. The powerful remain protected, the truth stays buried, and more people die in silence.
Dad.
Anna whispers, tears streaming down her face. Paulo lowers his weapon slowly. The colonel nods approvingly. But Paulo isn't surrendering. You want to know where Roberto is? Paulo says clearly. He's at Santo Antonio Cathedral in Aparecida. Sanctuary. With 3 witnesses and a ledger full of evidence that will destroy everyone involved in the Carandiru Massacre and the corruption that led to it. Eduardo's eyes widen in shock. Paulo, what are you doing? But here's what you don't know. Paulo continues, his voice growing stronger. 2 hours ago, Dr. Campos uploaded copies of her autopsy reports to 3 separate journalists. Eduardo Silva sent documentation of the gang's kidnapping operations to federal prosecutors. And I recorded every word of this conversation on a device that's been live-streaming to my former partner, Federal Prosecutor Maria Santos, who is currently outside this warehouse with 30 federal agents and a court order for your arrest. The colonel's face goes pale. You're bluffing. Am I? Paulo asks. And on cue, the warehouse is suddenly flooded with blinding light. Searchlights from outside. The sound of vehicles screeching to a halt. Bullhorns announcing federal authority. The colonel's men hesitate, weapons wavering. Their leader's confidence cracks. You see, Colonel, you made a mistake, Paulo says, his weapon now aimed steady at the colonel's chest. You assumed I was acting alone, that I was a desperate detective trying to save his daughter. But I was documenting everything. Every conversation. Every piece of evidence. Building a case strong enough that even your powerful friends couldn't bury it. You kidnapped the daughter of a federal officer. You just admitted to participating in extrajudicial executions. And you did it all on a live recording that's now in the hands of every major news outlet in Brazil. The warehouse doors burst open. Federal agents pour in, weapons drawn, surrounding the colonel's mercenaries. Maria Santos herself enters, holding up her badge and a court order. Colonel Augusto Ferreira, you're under arrest for kidnapping, conspiracy to commit murder, and crimes against humanity in connection with the Carandiru Prison Massacre. You have the right to remain silent, though I suspect you'll have a lot to say about who gave you orders. The colonel's mercenaries drop their weapons, hands raised. It's over in seconds. The guard holding Anna releases her, and she runs to Paolo, sobbing into his chest. He holds her tight, his own tears finally coming. Eduardo watches in amazement as federal agents take the colonel away in handcuffs. "How long have you been planning this?" he asks Paolo. "Since the moment they took Anna," Paolo admits. "I called Maria from the safe house, yes. But I also set up the live stream, contacted the journalists, and made sure every piece of evidence was distributed before we ever came here. I couldn't risk them destroying it if something went wrong. The rescue operation was real, but it was also bait. We needed the colonel to reveal himself, to connect himself directly to the massacre. And he did." Maria approaches, her expression a mix of respect and exhaustion. "You took a hell of a risk, Paolo. If we'd been 5 minutes later." "But you weren't," Paolo says. "And now we have everything. The colonel will talk to reduce his sentence. He'll give us the names of everyone involved. And with Roberto's ledger, we can build cases against every corrupt official who enabled this." Speaking of Roberto, Eduardo says, "Is he really at the cathedral in Aparecida?" Paolo shakes his head. "That was misdirection. If anything had gone wrong tonight, if the colonel had escaped, I wanted to send him to the wrong place. Roberto's somewhere much safer. And tomorrow, he'll turn over his evidence personally to the federal Supreme Court. No intermediaries. No chance for it to be buried." The sun is beginning to rise over São Paulo as they exit the warehouse. The city is waking up to a new reality. Within hours, news of the colonel's arrest will break. The evidence will be released. The Carandiru Massacre will be front-page news around the world. But for Paolo, standing with his arm around his daughter, watching the federal agents process the crime scene, there's a bitter triumph. Justice is coming, but it won't bring back the 111 dead inmates. It won't undo the corruption that made the massacre possible. It won't fix a system so broken that mass murder seemed like a solution. 2 weeks later, Paolo sits in Federal Prosecutor Maria Santos's office, reviewing the latest developments. Colonel Ferreira provided testimony about Minister of Justice Rafael Santos, who authorized the Carandiru operation as part of a broader campaign to appear tough on crime before elections. The minister is now in custody, along with 12 other officials. Roberto Mendoza testified before a closed congressional committee, his ledger providing evidence of corruption reaching into the highest levels of government. The public outcry has been immense. Protests fill the streets. International human rights organizations are demanding a full investigation. The president himself has called for reforms to the prison system. But Paolo knows that justice moves slowly. Trials will take years. Appeals will drag on. Some of the guilty will escape punishment through legal technicalities or political connections. The system is designed to protect itself. "It's not enough," he says to Maria, staring at the case files covering her desk. "It never is," she replies. "But it's more than we had 2 weeks ago. And sometimes that has to be enough to keep fighting." Paolo's phone rings. An unknown number. He almost doesn't answer, still conditioned to expect threats. But something makes him pick up. Detective Mendez? A voice he doesn't recognize. Young, nervous. "My name is Carlos. You interviewed me at Carandiru. The one who survived by hiding under bodies." "I remember," Paolo says. "Are you all right?" "I wanted to thank you," Carlos says, his voice breaking, "for not forgetting us. For not letting them bury the truth. My brother died in that massacre. He was guilty of crimes, yes. But he was still my brother. And he deserved better than being executed in a cell. Because of you, people know what happened. They know our names. We're not just numbers anymore. So, thank you." The call ends, and Paolo sits in silence for a long moment. Anna enters the office, bringing coffee. She stayed with him in São Paulo while her university is on break, unwilling to leave his side after everything that happened. She's different now. Harder. More aware of the darkness in the world. But also more determined to fight it. "The university called," she says. "They want to know if I'm coming back next semester." "Are you?" Paolo asks. She smiles, the same smile that's gotten her through 17 years of life. "Yes." But I'm changing my major. I'm not going to be a lawyer anymore. I'm going to be a journalist. Someone needs to tell these stories. Someone needs to make sure people remember. So it doesn't happen again. Paulo feels pride surge through him. His daughter, once innocent to the cruelty of the world, now choosing to face it head-on. To fight in her own way. 3 months after the arrests, Roberto Mendoza is released from protective custody and granted immunity for his testimony. Eduardo Silva receives a reduced sentence for his cooperation. Dr. Silvia Campos is reinstated as chief medical examiner and leads a team investigating deaths in custody across Brazil's prison system. And Paulo Mendes, no longer a detective after resigning from the police force, opens a private investigation firm specializing in cases the authorities would rather forget. On the 1-year anniversary of the Carandiru Massacre, Paulo stands outside the prison walls with Ana, Silvia, Eduardo, and Roberto. Hundreds of others have gathered for a memorial service. Families of the dead, survivors, activists, people who refuse to let the victims become just another statistic. A memorial plaque has been erected, listing all 111 names. Not criminals, not prisoners.
People.
Men with families, with stories, with lives cut short by a government that valued order over justice. Ana reads from a prepared statement, her voice carrying over the crowd. We remember not to celebrate or condemn, but to acknowledge. These men were not saints. Many had committed crimes. But they were still human beings entitled to due process, entitled to justice under the law. What happened here was not justice. It was murder. And we will not forget. The crowd is silent. Then, slowly, applause begins. Scattered at first, then building to a roar. Not celebration, but acknowledgement. Recognition that these deaths mattered. That the truth was worth fighting for. As the ceremony ends and the crowd disperses, Roberto approaches Paulo. The ghost, once the second most powerful man in Brazil's largest prison gang, now just a middle-aged man trying to rebuild a life outside the system that created him. What will you do now? Paulo asks. Roberto looks at the memorial plaque, at the names of men he once commanded. I don't know. For 20 years, my life was crime. Survival.
Power. Now?
I'm 43 years old with a criminal record and no legitimate skills. The system that created me is broken. But maybe I can help fix it. There's talk of a foundation helping former inmates reintegrate, using my experience to show others a different path. That's good, Paulo says. Redemption is possible, even after everything. Is it? Roberto asks, and there's genuine uncertainty in his voice. I survived Carandiru, but I was part of the violence that led to it. The kidnappings. The extortion. I have blood on my hands too, Paulo. Does exposing corruption erase that? No. Paulo answers honestly. But it's a start. None of us are innocent in this story. We're all complicit in systems that value punishment over rehabilitation, revenge over justice. But we can choose to be better. To build something better. As the sun sets over São Paulo, Paulo receives one final message. This one from an encrypted number but with a signature, Minister Rafael Santos, from his prison cell awaiting trial. You won, detective. You exposed the corruption. Destroyed my career. Brought down dozens of officials. You must feel very proud. But let me tell you what you actually accomplished. You've made heroes out of criminals. You've weakened law enforcement's ability to maintain order. And in 5 years, maybe 10, someone else will face the same choice I did. Let criminal gangs operate with impunity, or take extreme measures to stop them. And they'll remember what happened to me and choose to hide it better next time. You didn't fix the system, detective. You just made it more careful. Sleep well with that. Paulo deletes the message without responding. The minister is wrong. Change doesn't happen in one moment, one case, one exposure of corruption. It's a process. Slow. Painful. Often incomplete. But it begins with someone choosing to tell the truth, regardless of the cost. That night, Paulo dreams of Carandiru, but not of the massacre. He dreams of the prison as it might have been, a place of rehabilitation instead of punishment, of justice instead of revenge. A dream far from reality. But dreams, Paulo knows, are where change begins. The Carandiru Penitentiary was demolished in 2002, 10 years after the massacre. Today, a park stands where 8,000 inmates once lived in conditions designed to dehumanize rather than reform. The park is called Parque de Juventude, Youth Park, a symbol of hope built on a foundation of tragedy. But beneath the green grass and children's playgrounds, 111 men still rest in memory. Their names on a plaque. Their stories told. Their deaths not in vain. Because Paulo Mendez, Silvia Campos, Eduardo Silva, and Roberto Mendoza refused to let them be forgotten. And Ana Mendez, once a victim, now a voice for the voiceless, continues to tell their story. In articles, in documentaries, in university lectures, reminding each new generation that justice is not given. It is fought for. Every single day. The fight is never over. But it is always worth fighting. And sometimes, just sometimes, the truth wins. Not because it's easier than lies, but because people like Paulo choose to pay the price truth demands. Even when that price is everything.